Coming up next, highlights of the Interparliamentary Conference on the Global Environment. It is the first U.S.-sponsored conference of legislators to focus on the global environment and includes representatives of more than 40 nations. Participants include Senator Al Gore, the conference chairman, Jose Lutzenberger, the Secretary of the Environment in Brazil, and many others.
Good morning. On behalf of my colleagues in the United States Senate, I want to welcome you to Washington for this historic conference. Together, we face a global ecological crisis unlike anything humankind has ever encountered. Many of you here in this room have shown great courage and foresight in leading the battle to save the Earth's environment. The people you serve and the world you're fighting for will not forget your presence here this week. We have come together at a rare moment in human events. Around the world, the thirst for change is stronger and the possibility of change is greater than ever before. The forces of history are converging upon this single moment, the beginning of the 1990s. Around the world, people are throwing off years of subjugation and oppression and turning to democracy to set themselves free. East and West, North and South, parliamentary democracy is becoming the accepted form of government, and nation after nation has abandoned command economies for the power and freedom of the marketplace. The peoples of the world are linked as never before. Dramatic advances in communications have themselves become a force for change, speeding onward the tides of freedom. Each small shout for justice in one society now echoes with new meaning in every other society. And for the first time, all humankind stands united in the face of one common threat, the destruction of the Earth's ecological system, which supports life as we have known it. This time, the fear of self-annihilation draws us even closer, perhaps, than did the threat of nuclear holocaust. Whether we like it or not, the decision to avoid nuclear war rests primarily in the hands of a few leaders in a handful of nations. But the choice to save our global environment will be made not by the few, but by the many, billions of us on our own and with each other. That is the reason and the hope for this week's conference. Here we are, parliamentarians from around the world, coming together to address the world's most urgent challenge. In order to meet this challenge successfully, we must deal with its linkage to the other global issues which confront us. Each day, 37,000 children under the age of 5 die of starvation or easily preventable diseases made worse by the failures of crops and politics. We must stand together in an effort to create sustainable growth and release hundreds of millions of people in the developing world from the bonds of poverty. Every decade now, world population adds another China's worth of people. It took 1 million years to reach the first 2 billion people on Earth. In just the last 40 years, we have gone from 2 billion to 5 billion, and in the next 40 years, we will reach at least 10 billion. Those who live in the developed world must understand clearly that their per capita impact on the world's environment is 1,000 times greater than the per capita impact of those who live in the developing world. Nevertheless, all the peoples of the world share an interest in slowing the growth of the world's population. For years in our separate parliaments, we have longed for a way to bring humankind together to address the challenges which confront the world as a whole. I believe that in the 1990s, the effort to save the world's environment will emerge as the central organizing principle for achieving and safeguarding human progress. The environment is the one problem that matters equally to everyone, and the one on which answers to all these other problems rests. In a sense, this concern is nothing new. Caring for the earth is a basic tenet of most of the world's religions. My own religious faith teaches me that while we are given dominion over the earth, we are required to be good stewards of the earth. Stewardship is environmentalism in the broadest sense. To me, it means looking out for humankind and all that surrounds us, for the quality of the air we breathe, to the opportunity for all men and women to breathe free. At the end of World War II, the world's democracies banded together to build a new order around a single organizing principle to contain communism by spreading self-government and free markets. Now the Cold War is over. People on both sides of the Berlin Wall have torn it down. Nelson Mandela is free. Self-government is the wave of our common future. Now together we search for a new global unifying principle to give purpose to the common and concerted efforts of billions of free men and women. In my view, the effort to save the world's environment will become that unifying principle of the post-Cold War era. All of our policies and programs, whether to save the lives of children, promote sustainable growth, lift the burden of debt from the developing world, or control our exploding population, all will be seen as ways to serve that principle. There will always be an unbreakable link between environmentalism and democracy. It wasn't just a shared concern about pollution that made environmental activists such a powerful force in freeing Eastern Europe, or that inspired millions around the world to fill the streets on Earth Day. No, more fundamental forces are at work. Environmentalism and democracy share the same roots in the human spirit: individual responsibility, civic obligation, respect for the future, and an understanding that the only lasting progress is that which we make together. It is that human spirit which has brought us together here. The peoples of the world are ready to act to safeguard this planet. If prime ministers or presidents cannot or will not provide environmental leadership, then with or without them, we, the elected representatives of the peoples of the world, will do whatever it takes to protect the global environment. In our discussions over the next 3 days, we will examine alarming trends showing that the world is slipping away from us in the loss of the bounty of our oceans and rivers, in the loss of our forests and arable lands, in the loss of the atmosphere's ability to shield us from radiation, in the loss of many species of living things, and even in the loss of the Earth's climatic balance. In short, we are in danger of losing our equilibrium. We will be looking at great global tasks which we must master if we intend to live in balance with the Earth's natural systems. The issues involved are complex. They will demand important scientific advances. They will tax the ingenuity of decision makers, but they are at bottom political challenges, because real progress on the environment inevitably requires important changes in society. It is therefore especially important for parliamentarians to accept responsibility for these challenges. That is the purpose of this conference. At least one thing is now clear about how the political dimensions of the global environmental crisis must be handled. The solutions cannot be imposed by decree. They must arise from the consent of the governed, or they will not arise at all. Authoritarian governments have proven to be no better at caring for the natural environment than they have been at caring for their peoples. What applies at the national level is equally true at the global level. World cooperation, including joint information gathering, research, planning, financing, and implementation, are all vital. But it is a free will collaboration of like-minded governments that we must have. There can be no master global controls for the environment in which one part of the world attempts to dictate to another, or some supranational authority which dictates to nations how they shall behave. In short, the solutions to our problems must be conceived by free peoples living under the rule of law within an international system also governed not by force but by law. And that is where all of us in this room have something unique to contribute. Despite the great differences in our governmental systems, as legislators, we share a number of things in common. We represent the people in the process of self-governance. Heads of state administer the law. Courts interpret it, but only we can make it. To the extent that demands upon the earth now exceed the earth's ability to provide, we need law to codify policies for bringing about a sustainable balance. The alternative is civil strife within nations and war among them. The effort to ensure environmentally sustainable growth is a challenge of the first magnitude to the world community. It is a mistake to believe that the only way to save the environment is to cease economic development. It is also a mistake to believe that economic development, as we have known it in the past, is the only pattern available for economic development. Political realism, an understanding of basic human nature, and an awareness of enormous unsatisfied basic human needs, especially in the underdeveloped world, tells us otherwise. The choice is not between saving the environment and improving the lives of our people. We have threatened our environment with our patterns of economic development. In turn, our economies are now threatened by our damaged environment. Sustainable development is not a threat to economic growth or economic justice. Rather, it is the essential path by which growth can be continued in the future and a key to the struggle for economic justice as well. Law must also seek to balance the requirements of the present generation against the requirements of generations yet to come. In many respects, that is the most difficult task confronting lawmakers. Those who are affected in the present by what we do can hold us accountable, but future generations cannot. They can only thank or curse us long after we are gone. We should therefore note with special care that those who now are expressing the most concern for the world's environment are the children of every nation. We must acknowledge the claim of future generations or risk jeopardizing the continuity of civilization and even of our species. Therefore, we know that we must use law as a way to share the world not only among ourselves, but with our children and our children's children. The principle of environmental responsibility between the generations would appear to be among the few self-evident truths available to us. But the application of this principle in detail will be a severe test, not only of the wisdom of lawmakers, but also of the people themselves. We also know that while the causes of environmental problems are to be found in every nation, their effects are now increasingly global. Therefore, while a strengthening of national laws regarding the environment is necessary, it is not sufficient. To succeed, there must be a parallel strengthening of environmental law at the regional and international levels. Fortunately, awareness of the global environmental crisis is spreading throughout the world. There is a growing political will to meet this challenge, which in turn is changing the limits of what any of us might have thought to be feasible. Nevertheless, as the costs of change become clearer, strong differences will emerge at every level. These differences will be difficult enough to manage at the national scale. Internationally, they will be even tougher. The risk is all too evident that nations will polarize into groups as they have often done before, east, west, north, south, have and have not. Once this happens, we can set aside hope for decisive action to save the environment. Therefore, we should guard against unnecessary division. In some ways, we represent a microcosm of the political processes of the globe. That fact alone gives this meeting much of its significance. Much is expected of us. Our ability to find agreement here will be seen as evidence that an effective global consensus on the environment is possible. If we succeed, we shall be establishing an important precedent. There will be some temptation to assume
assume the roles of diplomats officially negotiating for the interests of our governments. That would be a mistake, because it leads rapidly to behavior which sees gain only in terms of someone else's loss. Rebuilding the global environment is not a zero-sum contest. It is a task which requires contributions from all, but which promises benefits for all. We are not diplomats, we are legislators, and we must use our particular skills as elected representatives of the people. In our respective parliaments, we must consider and balance the greater good of the nation against all competing values. That experience will be invaluable here as we consider matters in which the greater good of all peoples, both now and in the future, must be weighed against the value of particular interests. Let us attempt to find areas of agreement as to fact, as to principle, and as to action. Let us talk about what we think we can properly do at the national level, and then about those things which can only be done at the global level. Let us forthrightly discuss not only national rights, but also national responsibilities. The issues we shall grapple with have been and will continue to be dealt with by scientists, diplomats, and business leaders. Each of these groups will bring to bear its own professional skill. Our skill is politics. It has been defined as the art of the possible. Our task, our great opportunity, is to apply that skill to give the peoples of the world the hopeful news that far more is possible than the pessimists believe. This week, we have an unprecedented opportunity to advance a new ethic of environmental democracy. In convening this conference, we hope that representatives of the world's parliaments could come together and send a message to people everywhere who care about the earth and to leaders who had better learn to. The message is simple. On the environment, the people govern. Before you return to your respective countries, I propose that we, as representatives of parliaments from all over the world, issue a declaration of environmental interdependence that lays out our agenda for safeguarding the future of this planet. Let us declare that we, the peoples of the world, as the faithful stewards of future generations, resolve to stop the global deterioration of our common environment, the depletion of our stratospheric ozone, the pollution of our air and water, the destruction of our forests and soil, the explosion of our populations, the fatal toxification of Earth's biological species, and the growing prospect of permanent change in our climate. Above all, let us recognize that the prevention and reduction of global environmental damage imposes burdens of restraint and resources, requires solutions from technology and science, and cannot succeed unless both these burdens and these solutions are equitably shared among all the nations of the earth. We must lift our voices together to confront those who do not see the urgency of saving the earth, as well as those who doubt humankind's ability to avert its own destruction. By our actions, we must prove their skepticism wrong. Not so long ago, those same voices were saying that tyranny could break the will of freedom, that good might never triumph over evil, and the dreams of humanity could be forever thwarted. In 1990, the peoples of the world tore down walls that shall not be raised again. From Tiananmen Square to Wenceslas Square, men and women sang the old hymn, "We Shall Overcome." Like the Berlin Wall, the obstacles we now face may seem immovable, but so is our determination to surmount them. With the winds of change and the global force of environmental democracy behind us, we too shall overcome.